which we're slightly running with at the moment. This gentleman doesn't need too much introduction, this is me. So I'm just going to go. I think one thing I did want to say at the beginning is that I think my stance whenever I come to a conference is that I like to think that maybe I can come away with one good idea. I think conferences last a long period of time. I think there's a lot of positivity in the room and a lot of knowledge in the room, and I've certainly picked up a lot already. But in terms of the short presentation I'm going to give now, I think there's actually quite a lot of consistency with what other people have said both yesterday and today. And I don't see that as a bad thing, so I'll be reinforcing some of the key messages that have been put across. But I think it is encouraging that we as sports professionals in the room, each and every one of us from different countries around the world, we are actually talking the same language when it comes to partnerships and sponsorships. And I'm just going to share with you just a few anecdotes in terms of my experiences and see how they tie in with the overall theme of the conference. Okay, so you're probably sick of the sight of me by now because I've been on stage for far too long. I'm sure I was only booked to come for 20 minutes, but you ended up having me for a lot longer. But that's me, Adrian Stores. I probably should say right at the beginning and now for something completely different because I'm going to sort of try and inject a little bit of northern Manchester humour into the presentation. I'm not too good at being purely formal in terms of my approach to things, so I'll try and tell things the way it is. And certainly I'll be around for the rest of the day if anybody wants to inquire a bit more detail into some of the case studies. I simply find myself working for a company now called ACROBAT FCSM, based in Manchester. I think would loosely be called consultants, but I think the danger with the word consultant in this day and age is that it's become a bit overvalued, I think, in terms of people purporting to perhaps be all things to all people. I learned very early in life that actually I'm a very simple individual. Very simple individual, because when I started I might have had this long list of things that I thought I could do, but very soon I realised that in terms of the things that I could actually add value to, in terms of partnerships, that I'm very simple in that I'm only one of three things. I'm either a strategic marketeer, I'm either a fundraising person, or I'm a sponsorship individual. And everything else outside that world, I need to come to you lovely people to get the advice, because you know far more about these subjects than I do. But just by way of background, because there is some young people in the room, in fact everybody's young in the room compared to me, but there is some young students and people starting off in their career in sport, and I probably did no different from an awful lot of people in terms of getting into this profession. I did my first degree, and then most importantly after that, I funded myself to do a master's degree in sports marketing in Sheffield. And I know you all think I'm 21, but it was actually some 35 years ago. But that led me into the marketplace, into a sector that I've thoroughly enjoyed working in. How many people for 35 years in their career can say they actually love the job that they do? So ACROBAT FCSM in Manchester is a strategic marketing consultancy. To give a little bit in terms of the nature of me as an individual. Obviously we have to charge fees to work with clients, and I like to think we're very, very cost effective. But sometimes organisations come along in sport that might be small charities, small community groups, small volunteer groups, and I hate to say no. I hate to say, I'm sorry, but you can't afford us. So what we did a couple of years ago, we launched a business called CrowdScrum, and it's purely so that I don't have to say no. Now I can say to small organisations, look, normally you'd have to pay us a fee. We can't take this work on, we can't justify it, but go on this yourself and we'll try and help you in the background. So it's just a simple crowdfunding site. And we've helped a few athletes along the way just to achieve small budgets, but small budgets that have made a difference in terms of their careers. And the latter thing, despite the fact I said I wasn't all singing or dancing, the other area that we're getting involved in more and more now is we've set up a sports agency. I've spent 35 years of my life saying I don't want to be an agent. I'm still saying that, I don't want to be an agent, but I've met somebody who does things for the right reasons, for player welfare across multi-sports, is very interested in the charitable side of sport, and so I've said I'll do the legal stuff and the governance behind the scenes, you do all the agency stuff, and Ballon Sports Agency has been launched recently. But Adrian Stores, as I say, that's the background, that's how I got into the sector. I ended up also as chairman of the Chartered Institute of Marketing, which is the main professional body for our sector, covering the whole of Europe. And on the back of that, I was chairman for that institute, but not for the whole industry, just for the sports sector. But the reason that was helpful for me, and it's helpful for anybody in the room that wants to pursue a career linking in with their professional body, is that that gave me an inroad to ending up working for 15% of all the pro football clubs in England and Wales, increasingly working on a global basis with some big brands in terms of sporting clubs around the world, 25 local authorities, municipalities in terms of sports and leisure departments, lots of grassroots sports, and 6 governing bodies of sports. And that's my background. That's how that's what's taking me in to talk to you today about partnerships in the main. Quick check on the technology. Okay. I don't want to suggest that there's a case of one size fits all, but in terms of when I get involved with partnerships, in terms of when I get involved with sponsorships, just for what it's worth, I wanted to share with you some of the common facets, some of the common elements in terms of my approach. Because I have to say, it doesn't matter whether I'm doing marketing, fundraising, sponsorship, there does seem to be some common elements, and a lot of these have come through from these keynote speakers and panelists over the last day or two. It's a simple model that I wrote myself. I've just called it the 7 C's. And what it says is that you don't just say, I'm going to do a sponsorship project, I'm going to do a partnership project, and this is the approach, this is the book I take off the shelf. I do like to treat every single project as a blank sheet of paper. And even though I've been doing this for 35 years, I like to start and treat every sports organisation as absolutely unique. But there's common elements that have come to it. One is that I start looking at the marketplace, and that's what I call community. I've said that there's a big wide market out there, and this could relate to whether it be the fans, it could relate to sponsors we're trying to engage with, it could relate to any host of stakeholders. But what I have to try and do is realise that I can't have a scattergun approach to my activities. I've got to start to be a little bit more fine-tuned in my approach. And the way that I do that is that I look at this community at large, and what I try and do once I understand the sporting organisation is identify like-minded people of a certain demographic, certain profile, maybe socioeconomic, maybe gender, maybe ethnicity, a whole host of factors come into play. But by doing that, I then put a filter on this big mass market, and I start to get people who've got a commonality in their approach, and that's what I call the crowd. Those of us in marketing, experienced people like Andrea's wonderful presentation earlier, would talk about things like market segmentation, and that's what it is, it's market segmentation. It's trying to break down that global marketplace into a more fine-tuned target that we can aim at. And what we do from that in terms of our adding value in partnerships is we've then got a target audience. And once we've got a target audience, we can create a campaign. We signpost people in a certain direction, whether that be giving money, whether it be getting sponsors, and we go through the whole methodology of multi-platform communication. We've heard a lot about digital communications in the last day or two, but across both traditional and online communications, we create a campaign to let the world know about this particular appeal. For us, the ultimate is to get success by conversion. Shaking hands is all about either securing a sale, getting a sponsor, or bringing money in. That tends to be the metrics that we use in terms of how we're successful or not. But what I did put on there is that things don't always run smoothly. I think particularly if anybody's been involved with sports crowdfunding campaigns, what you do realise is that sometimes you have to change the goalposts as you go along. Things might not be working quite the way you want them. And that's why we have a pillar on there called compass, because what I'm saying is you might have to take corrective action at some point in time and reverse down the pyramid to start again, to ultimately lead all the way to the top where you start celebrating your achievement against some of your goals. So a very simple philosophy, but one that's got some common characteristics in terms of areas that we work. So we now work all around the globe, but we work with people that you all know, brands that you'll know, like particularly in football, Barcelona, we've done stuff with Galatasaray, Besiktas, Fenerbahce, Sevilla, Panathinaikos. But we're also having increasingly a global approach and a multi-sports approach. I just wanted to share a few things in relation to the approach that we took at Barcelona, not least because I thought it might give inspiration and give some guidance. I think an awful lot of it goes back to what I was saying before. It's not a case of one size fits all, it's not a case of a standardised approach. We had to be very, very focused in what we did. We had if you like, an inverted triangle. And that inverted triangle for Barcelona, it just showed that there was different categories of sponsorship that we might go for. I was not an agent at all with players. I was purely responsible for sponsorship in the country of Turkey. That was my targeted audience. And it wasn't a case of put a key in Adrian's bag, wind it up and say, go and get sponsors. It was much more strategic than that. And that was, the credit for that goes to the club, not to me. And what they would say is, we've got these categories. Okay, top category, actually the pyramid, the triangle is like that, with the different categories, but you could actually put the triangle upside down and say the peak of the first triangle would relate to more money, because at the top you'd have category 1 and you'd have something like the Qatar Foundation. The second category behind that you'd have some big profile brands, so you might have people like Turkish Airlines, you might have people like Beko. The third category, some of you will know of, some of you might not know of, but things like the Barcelona sporting camps that will go on throughout Turkey, sponsored by the telecommunications giant Avia. And the fourth category would have people like corporate social responsibility and a whole host of other partners that work on a regional basis. So there's a bit of a science to it like that. The other thing about it not being a scattergun approach is the fact that Barcelona would say to you, Adrian, this month what we're going to do is we're going to go for banks. This month we're going to go for white goods. This month we're going to go for airlines. So it was very strategic. It wasn't going to go to everybody. And there's a few things that just to say, try and speed this up, is that in keeping with the way that other people have spoken, there's certain key facets that you do have to take on board. One was that I learned, and a number of people in the audience who are dealing with other countries like India, like China, we have to employ a different tact. In England, traditionally, we like to go straight for the kill in terms of our sale. Completely the wrong approach. If I went to Turkey, my friends who do the same sort of business in China, an awful lot of it is about building up relationships, and not even talking about sales, and perhaps till the third, fourth, fifth trip, because it's building relationships. This lad from Manchester, who's absolutely terrible at languages, had to spend 3 years at night school and learn to speak Turkish. That was a big achievement for me. But also me going into the country of Turkey, I ended up marrying a Turkish girl. And so, like most solid people in the room, you like to consult with your partner. And I said to my partner, I said, look, I'm representing Barcelona, a big brand, I'm going to Turkey. Just give me one word of advice on how to secure the sponsorship of this partnership. She said, Adrian, just don't be yourself. I said, what do you mean by that? She said, you're always putting your arm around people, you try to be cuddly, you think you're funny, you're not funny. We don't do this in business management meetings in Turkey. So, again, trying to be completely proper. I ignored my wife completely. Within seconds, I think the first meeting was Vesta. Beko, actually, big country, arm around the managing director, telling jokes, having a laugh, putting my slides up, putting pictures of my family in the presentation, completely informal. At the end of it, and this is not trying to be too standardised, but the common message I got back to me was, wow, I enjoyed that. We didn't think you'd be like that. You're actually one of us, you're a warm person. We had this image that English people were pinstripe suits, bowler hats, very, very cold. John Haskell to your religious festival. And the fact they were doing that, the amount of publicity and PR they got on the back of just showing empathy with the audience that they're trying to facilitate a relationship with. Basic stuff, but stuff that can make a difference in terms of partnership. Another example, added value. We can all pick up journals, talk about the World Cup, talk about the Olympic Games, talk about the economic value. Andrea, again, talked about the catalyst of having the arena and what it did for the local area in terms of things that got built on the back of that. In England, we have this thing where we have rugby union. I think Samuel's in the audience somewhere, who's rugby union. We also have rugby league. This is rugby league. Once a year in rugby league, we have something called the Magic Weekend. It's stimulated by the governing body in England. the Rugby Football League, and it's the Magic Weekend, and the whole emphasis is about going to a certain city in the UK. It happens to have been over the last few years Newcastle in the northeast of England, and the idea is just to give publicity to the sport. So all the teams wear a different kit just for that weekend, a snazzy kit. They try to attract people from all around the UK, and they try to publicise the interest in Rugby League. So if you take Magic Weekend for 2018, which has just happened, £7.7 million was generated in Newcastle on the back of this event for the weekend. It's been going on for the last 3 years, which is 28.3 million has been invested into the local economy, just over that one initiative in the northeast of England. And they reckon, going back to Eve's presentation yesterday, that circa 3,000 people extra, kids in particular, have picked up and taken up the sport of rugby league on the back of initiatives like this, because England is suffering a problem like many other countries in terms of sedentary existence, lack of exercise, obesity. I'm a prime example, as you can see. Things like this need to be done. So that's an example of a good economic benefit from a partnership. More than a sport is what I put on there, because in terms of partnerships, particularly when you're involved with fundraising and sponsorship, once upon a time when I started off, it was all about putting your sport into a particular category, into a particular pigeonhole. Increasingly, I might not even mention the word sport. And what I mean by that is that we all talk about, we've been talking since we've got here in Romania, about the benefits of sport. And when I'm looking for funding, and when I'm wanting to make things happen in the UK or overseas, I'm quite often going to funding pots which might relate to nothing to do with sport whatsoever. So it might be education. We all know education links to sport. It might be exercise. It might be health. It might be well-being. It might be good citizenship. It might be social inclusion between different groups. I go to all of these strange pots and people look at me thinking I'm absolutely crazy. But actually, they tie back into sport. We've got Stavat in here on the front row who's smiling at me. I obviously owe him money. But he's smiling at me because he's doing something around Peace Ball project. It's all about the demographics, particularly in terms of places like Syria, southern Turkey, and he's utilising the sport of football, he's utilising sport as a methodology to create greater integration and to bring greater well-being to people who are suffering in those particular regions. So I'm working now on partnerships. I'm head of partnerships with the FA in England for the English schools. And the first sponsor that we brought on, the first partner we've got on, you wouldn't think of it traditionally, but it's a university. It's called the University Campus of Football Business, UCFB. The university model is based in the Etihad Stadium in Manchester, and it's based in the Wembley Stadium. And I was fascinated to listen to George's presentation yesterday about Ajax, because things like this, learning, doing education in a sporting environment, and really making a difference. I'm just waiting for the first one to open in Romania, because there's the scope for this sort of model everywhere you go. We've got Mike Farnan in the room, whose background is Manchester United International, and he's very closely related to people like Ryan Giggs and Gary Neville, ex-players of Manchester United. They're just opening for September 2019 UA92, so it's the class of 92 at Manchester United. I've got a degree course university in the city of Manchester, and they've even got Microsoft taking space inside that university. So every single student is guaranteed a placement at Microsoft. Every single student is guaranteed top-level sporting education. So again, it's a different world, but one where partnerships look outside of the box from just traditionally sport. More than sport, I'm also working with Salford Red Devils, a Super League club at the moment. This was the shirt that they developed for Magic Weekend. They did it because of the bee. Some of you will know, some of you will not know, but the bee has become synonymous with Manchester. It went back in time because it was a concept of the worker bee. It came to publicity again recently after a year and a half ago we had the atrocity at the Ariana Grande concert in Manchester where there was the bombing and unfortunately people lost their lives. In memory of that, for Salford and Manchester, we put this kit out. It was voted the best kit of the weekend by everybody there from all around the country. But also, it brought people together, sport. Anybody that suffered mentally, physically, as a result of that bombing in Manchester, got free entry to the games. There was £50,000 immediately given by the club into a charitable pot to help those that had suffered, particularly the mental issues associated with it. And the whole ethos, and you can see videos of all of these things on YouTube, The whole ethos is about bringing people together, working as a community. Sport becomes a secondary issue. Sport is what we're all about, all of us in the room. But actually, the emphasis of something like that and community development and that ideology of the B is a big positivity in Salford and one that's carried major weight. Another thing we're doing at Salford at the moment, and I'm conscious of time, is that we've set up an initiative called Club 13. Club 13 is because there's 13 players in the rugby league, and it's distinct from the 15 in rugby union. Simple concept, but one that's getting major accolades in the UK, because when we look at doing partnership approaches, we've always got to look to try and do something a little bit different. And all we've said is, Club 13 is where business and sport collides. A little bit playing on the concept of rugby and smashing into each other, colliding. But a lot of people who love sport, and any sport, they want to get together, like we do at Sport Business Chain. They want to network, they want to talk to each other, they want to do business. That's all we've done. Every single month, usually on the 13th of every month, anybody interested in sport in Manchester comes together. We have different key speakers. We might do it on a match day and they get free entries to the matches, but we're building a community. And not only is that a really good, close-knit community that works for us at Salford Red Devils, it's one that's generating income streams into the club that they never had before. Okay, they had business clubs before, but nothing as innovative as Club 13. Okay, just to bring towards an end, the last one, I'd like to take wonderful credit for my impressive Romanian on here, but I have to say it's down to Cosmic, the translation. Again, just to show that this it is a partnership, so I want to reinforce some of the things again. 2 years ago, as some of the people in the room know, I set up Stockport Volleyball Club. I've ended up being chairman of Stockport Volleyball Club. I've never played volleyball in my life, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm absolutely crazy, as you can tell. 2 years ago, set it up. Now we've got 100 adults, 100 children, professional men's team. Went into the National League last year. We smashed people like Manchester. We've been doing it for years. And it's nice to know in my time off, that's a joke. It's nice to know in my time off that we can practice these things. But the reason I put that on there is because we've always tried to do things different, thinking different. So all of the adverts we've done in different countries, Bulgarian, Romanian, Polish, Turkish, you name it, because all our best players come from Eastern Europe, not surprisingly. But also, the reason I put this up is not because it's just to talk about myself, but it's to talk about the fact that the reason this is sustainable as a sports organisation, and the reason it's got added value partnerships, is because once again, we're not looking at it as just a sports club. We've got the police pay us money. The police in the UK pay us money, because we do social inclusion. We've got charities associated with the bombing giving us money, because some of the Muslim communities, for example, suffered. They feared there would be retributions from what happened in Manchester, but we're a welcoming, open volleyball family, so everybody comes through the door. We've got health service paying us money because we deal with anti-obesity. We get adults that haven't been anywhere near a sports facility for donkey's years to come back and to get involved. So again, if there's nothing else as a message I want to put across, it's just thinking outside the box, thinking wider than sport. But when you're looking at sustainability and added value partnerships, you have to go to considerations like this. Last case study is just to show England handball. We've got two wonderful people in the room who just had an excellent presentation on handball. And it's just to show that I am not an expert. I'm not an expert in anything. But there's some common grounds in terms of things that you can learn, that you can apply. So I started football as I started off. I'm now at volleyball, swimming, cycling, handball, working on the head of partnership now for England handball. I'd never seen a handball match before. I went to watch my first game about 2 months ago, and I had to get the video people to pull me away from it because it was fascinating. It was brutal. It had everything for me. Combination of volleyball and rugby, all the things that I love. It's a fantastic sport. But I've just done the first deal for them, and we've actually done it on a clothing company, because again, to add sustainability on that partnership, put it out to tender, and we've gone with Kappa. We've gone with Kappa because they offer a fantastic deal in terms of sponsorship revenue. They offer an awful lot of benefit in kind, in terms of kit contribution to the academies and the teaching staff. But it'll also do deals so that Kappa hopefully will become the supplier of choice in terms of the clothing industry into the UK. And the governing body, which like every other governing body needs money, it will be a nice sustainable model for them going forward. Final quote for Mr. Messi as we started earlier on. It's a quote not that came from Mr. Messi, it's a quote that came from Albert Einstein. You have to learn the rules of the game and then you have to play better than anyone else. You can imagine in any of the presentations that we're doing here over these 3 days, that can apply in the context of what you're talking about, but I find it particularly opportune because we like to understand what it is we're trying to do, and then we do try to do it that much better than anybody else. It's hard work. Anybody in this room can do what I do. The reality is that you just got to be as daft as me. You've got to have as lack of sleep like I do. You've just got to try and come up with some new ideas and do things outside the box, and you can get the results in partnerships and sponsorship. So on that note, I'll leave with a wonderful picture of Cosmin and his father outside a famous Romanian football club. And because my Romanian is so limited in life, the only thing I can say is thank you, so mulțumesc.